Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on your time zones. Before we get started, I would like to start with some housekeeping notes. This is a multilingual international webinar, which is very exciting. But of course, it always comes with some additional logistics. So we will be, we have interpreters and translators. If you want to listen in Spanish or in Portuguese, we have that option available for you. And I put the instructions in the chat. So you need to tune in to one of the channels in order to hear the webinar in Spanish or in Portuguese. If you do not need interpretation, please still tune into the English channel. That way you will be able to hear the Spanish interpretation. We have a Spanish-speaking panelist who will be speaking in Spanish. And so if you are just in the main channel, you will not be able to hear the Spanish-speaking panelist. So to do that, you can go to the bottom of your screens where all the icons are, and you will be able to see an icon with a picture of the word that is named interpretation. You click on there, you'll have a menu that says listen in, and you should click listen in English. And that way you will be able to hear the full content of the webinar. We will be monitoring the Q&A, so please use that chat to share your feedback, your thoughts. We'll go back to the Q&A at the end. We are not able to hear you, and we are not able to see the chat. So please use the Q&A function if you want to message us, that we do see. And if you are, yes, actually change update, the chat is working, but please still use the Q&A function if you want to ask a question, because that's the best way for us to see it. And again, welcome everybody. Excited to actually start. So I will introduce myself briefly, let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. Then we will have a quick, or not so quick, roundtable conversation. And finally, we will have time for Q&A from the audience. So again, please type up your questions. We'll get back to them. My name is Chiara Benetalo. I am the Executive Director of the Puttkammer Center of Educational Justice and Equity at the Petey Greene program. The Petey Greene program, as many of you know, is a U.S. organization that offers tutoring and other academic programming, including college readiness and a lot of other support activities for people who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. We're actually the largest provider of tutoring and academic support services for incarcerated people in the US. We were established in 2008, 16 years ago, and since then we have been growing. We're currently mostly on the East Coast, but growing nationally. And as of late, we have been doing more research in addition to practice to really think about not only what are the gaps in the field of education in prison and education for people who are returning from prisons, and what is the best way to approach them in a way that really is evidence-based and it's informed by knowledge that is out there in the field. I am really excited to be presenting and moderating today's webinar on education and global mass incarceration. I'm joined here from by panelists from all over the world, and we may have another couple of panelists joining us in a minute. So without further ado, I will ask our panelists if they can introduce themselves and tell us a little bit also about what do you do, whether it's your personal journey as a student, as an educator, and also what do you do currently in your organizations, in your institutions. Danny, maybe I'm going to start from you.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Danny Murillo. I am the co-founder of Berkeley Underground Scholars, a student support program for formerly incarcerated students at the University of California, Berkeley. I'm also the associate director. I've been the associate director since the beginning of 2023, but a co-founder when we started this in 2013. At that time, I was a student here at Berkeley. I had just finished serving a 14-year sentence from out of a 15-year sentence. During that time in incarceration, I spent 7 years in solitary confinement, which was the remainder of my sentence. It's where I started my educational journey. After I came home, I continued my educational journey. And 2 years later, I ended up transferring to the University of California, Berkeley, where we started a program, a student organization called Underground Scholars Initiative. And throughout the years, we've been, advocating. A lot of it was grassroots organizing that we were doing as a student organization. And now we sit here at the University of California as a program that's serving formerly incarcerated students at the university. And we also provide services for formerly incarcerated students who aspire to come to the university, who are currently attending community colleges. We have a community college system of 115 colleges throughout California, where when students complete their educational journey there, they could either join the job or attempt to join the job market or transfer to a university. So we support that. We support them in continuing their education, and we also support incarcerated students that aspire to come to the university. Right, also part of our programming. We also provide a lot of support and services for our students here at the university, whether it's partnering with our campus partners or partners in the community, trying to do everything possible to make sure that they are able to complete their academic journey and also transition into the career that they want to pursue in, right? Thank you.
Thank you. That is wonderful. And it really sounds like you are able to reach an incredible amount of people doing really important work. And we'll talk more about it later, but I'm really passionate and fascinated by the how much self-organizing exists in the world of higher education in prison and in reentry spaces. So the work of the underground scholars is really a great example of that collective native self-organizing. So thank you for that. Valentine, can I call on you next to share your work and your journey?
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone from all over the world. My name is Valentine Idrisani. I'm speaking all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. At age 21, I find myself in prison. I spent the total years of 21 years in prison, and most of those years were spent on death row awaiting execution. I was on death row when I had the opportunity to enroll at the National Open University, where I study peace study and conflict resolution. I graduated. And also, I was on death row when I wrote my first book as an author, and I wrote the second one also, where I was on death row. By divine providence, I was discharged and acquitted by the higher court. And today I work with CELSA, Center for Legal Support and Inmate Rehabilitation in here, Lagos, in Nigeria. So I'm the lead CELSA ambassador. The lead CELSA ambassador is a group of formerly incarcerated individuals who has come together to showcase the positivity and the transformation they have encountered through education when they were incarcerated. So I'm the lead CELSA ambassador, and I'm also the Global Freedom Fellows member, the first cohort. And also today I'm a project supervisor also at the CELSA. So what I spearhead the juvenile educational program, the juvenile delinquency, those who are the juvenile who are in conflict with the law. So I spearhead the program. You know, these are the young ones who are being discriminated. They only have the opportunity to basic education. So the CELSA as an organization has partnered with the state government to offer an education to the higher level, with the junior secondary school to them. So today we are so proud to embark on this great project. We also offer to other the adult correctional centers across Lagos State. We have 5 to 6 prisons across the Lagos State, including the female prison. We also offer them educational program and also other life skills. So CELSA is a non-profit making organization committed to rendering free legal support to indigent incarcerated individuals, and also rehabilitation assistance that equipped incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals with life skills capable of sustaining them when reunited into the society. So to the glory of God, with all this, we'll be able to transform our struggles into accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you. That is such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing it with us. As you say, transforming struggles into accomplishments is something that is just incredibly powerful. And I'm honored to have you here with us, author, community organizer. And I think one thing that struck me from your journey and also the work that you do is the connection between what happens inside prisons and what happens outside prisons. People, benefit from support when they are incarcerated, but also after they are released. And it's so crucial that we, as educators and as organizers, provide a continuum of opportunities from inside to outside prisons. So thank you very much. And I'm going to move us to our last but not least panelist, Dan White, asking you the same question to please introduce yourself and what you do. I'm also going to remind our panelists and myself to please pause occasionally as you speak, and to take some breaths so that our translators and interpreters have time to translate. Thank you.
So hi, thank you. My name is Dan White. I am from here, London, in England, the UK. So I am formerly incarcerated. I have an extensive lived experience, 20 years behind the door. During that time, I went from zero education, as I didn't complete school. I pretty much completed most of my educational journey through prison. So I went from zero to starting and completing the first year of my PhD in criminology, which I am in my final year of now. Also in that final year, I co-founded and now co-direct an organization called DWRM, or Doing What Really Matters. We are a higher education facilitator. We bring a number of university partners with us to the prison estate. We found new study solutions to enable people to access higher education, to be able to, in effect, go to any of the universities of our, within our partnerships to study whatever subject they want. We support our students. As I said, we develop study and support solutions to enable our students to have direct, often contact with their universities weekly, and ongoing study support via us, via our free phone and a number of other methods. We then understanding the same issues that Valentin mentioned and spoke about, that whole complete journey through their prison sentence and through the gate. We have three main strands of our organization. Firstly, the higher education, as we talked about, and all things that lead up to that and supporting through that. Then we have our through the gate provision, which enables people either side of release in the last 12 weeks or any time through the gate after to engage in our employability program, which enables them to get ready for work now. So whilst they may need to study, whilst out here in the community, they will also need to find work. So we enable them to do that, get them ready for work. We have other organizations that we're partnered with that find and produce all the job opportunities. And then most importantly for us is that final stage where all of our students, all of those formerly incarcerated, able to then give back. They're able to do that via mentoring through us. We train our mentors, etc., and then set them on their way. We also have many of our formerly incarcerated going back into prisons to engage in workshops, to give of their experiences, show people, guide them in ways to move forward, inspire them in the first place to get into education, show them the benefits of doing so, what we're doing out here, what these guys can achieve no matter where they started from. So people like myself, having completed a 20-year sentence, and yet able to function throughout the justice system. And most notably, we've made, with our Ministry of Justice, who runs all of our prison estate across England and Wales, I myself and other members of my team have found ourselves, managed to secure ourselves significant positions within the prison estate. So, for example, I chair the Employment Advisory Board of one of the high security prisons. There are 92 board chairs across the country. Most of those are business leaders, the industry, etc., and then myself. So I'm only one of two of that 92 that have any lived experience at all. So it is, it's quite a thing. And then finally, and I think this is where the full circle comes in and where I'd like to leave it, I'm a key holder in a high security estate, which means they've given me keys to walk around the same prisons that I was locked up in. So I think that is what we call going full circle, and what we stress to all of our students, all of our contacts, and everybody in prison, that this is just the start of your journey. It can be just the start of your journey, and there's no ceiling, there's no glass ceiling, there's no ceiling at all. We can go wherever we need to. So that's us and that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Another incredible journey. Thank you for sharing it with us. And it's really really powerful how you mentioned how incarceration can really be the first step in something new that happens in people's lives, and how incredible to hear how things have come full circle for you. We talked at the beginning with Danny about self-organizing, and I think we have here 3 really powerful examples of that kind of organization. And as you mentioned, having people who are themselves have that lived experience and are able to going back to the prisons, to sometimes the spaces where themselves you were formerly incarcerated, can be a source of inspiration and education for people who are still in prison, and that are able to see the possibilities that are out there. So that's incredibly important. Thank you all for your work. And as you all can see, we are spanning from Mexico and the US to Nigeria to the UK. Really a wide berth of experiences from all over the world. I do want to remind that this is because all of our panelists are Global Freedom Fellows, and we are working with Incarceration Nations to hold this webinar and this series of webinars. So also want to thank Incarceration Nations for bringing us those panelists and connecting me to those wonderful activists and scholars and educators. Danny, you unmuted yourself. Do you want to add anything? No. Right. So then we heard about the role of education in your lives as students and in your lives as educators. I actually want to ask all of them, why is education in prisons and carceral spaces important? Why should we care about all of this?
I think I'll take a, answer that and then let my partners come in. I think for one, it's not that just education itself is important, but I think also the question of like what kind of education, because this is just speaking more like of what we see in the U.S., right? Education can be watered down. Education can be what we would call whitewash, right? And it can be made to kind of be a passive type of education that doesn't allow you to really think critically about your condition and allow you to see things from a larger perspective, right? Similar to, not all religion is like that, but some parts of religion can be like that, where it's like, it's you're the problem and we need to fix you, outside of questioning what's happening in these social systems and structures. So I think, but yes, education is important. I was lucky enough that, prior to going to prison, I've always had an appreciation for education, especially for history. But even at that age, I went into jail at 16, went to prison at 18. My education was really more just of a passive type of form of, I was reading books on Mexican history and culture, Mexican culture. I really had a deep appreciation for it. My parents are from Mexico, but I was born in the U.S. But I have double citizenship, right? And so I've always had an appreciation for you, just like knowing the dates and just certain names of historical figures. But then once I, started doing more time with people that have been in prison for years and were, reading literature at a very deeper and critical level, that allowed me to, start understanding like, oh, history is not just history. There's a lot more to it that comes with it. And with that critical analysis, I was able to also view my own, life through a critical lens, right? And really allow me to see what role did I play in my own incarceration, right? Because I understand, at the end of the day, I have choices, but I come from a place where those choices were very limited or non-existent.
Thank you. Yes, and I think I want to go back also to this point of education is important. Education can be incredibly enriching and even transformative for people who are incarcerated and also people who are not incarcerated. But we should really think about what kind of education. And for us at the Petey Greene program, it's also really important that we provide and foster and support high quality education that is not just there to fill the time, but it's there to promote critical thinking and to support people in advocating for themselves and in questioning the systems that led to the incarceration crisis that we are seeing in the US and worldwide. Dan, yes, Dan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Danny's point. The importance of education is kind of threefold for me, for us, for those that I see. First and foremost, so many, statistically, so many people in prison who have been to prison have had negative experiences of school. Yeah, not necessarily. And this is one of the biggest things that most people who turn to education in prison later in their lives come to realize that their negative experiences of school is not actually a negative experience of learning. And so learning in a different context in and itself is powerful. It is also, it gives people that chance to understand that they actually, missed out on certain things and are able to then, gain back that knowledge and then go further. I think starting and stopping, there's something very different about education as an adult or as an older individual past, recognized school age that has its own separate set of, other side benefits, other skills, other attributes that are not blatantly obvious to start with. And second of all, the next thing is, as we all know, knowledge is power. So being able to increase our individual feeling of being powerful, being worthy, being present, being a part of is absolutely key. And the gaining of knowledge in whatever area or whatever pursuit that is absolutely crucial. And third and finally, for people that sit with, we know about all we all sit and live with the negative labelings and stereotypes that are connected with prison sentences, with having a criminal record or any of the above. So being able to change or take on a new identity, connect ourselves to a different community, to that which we may have previously grown with and only ever been in or around. So being able to connect to another community that is accepting of people in prison or formerly incarcerated or actually incarcerated at that time. Being able to connect to a new identity, to a new community, and therefore give ourselves a new identity in that respect, to give ourselves a new position to stand for. That is probably the single most crucial element of education that I think, because that then opens the door for us to be able to go on and do anything else that we want to put our minds to.
Thank you. Yes, I think a couple of things that I want to spotlight from your response, this question of identity and how education, yes, it's access to knowledge, and through knowledge is access to power, which is crucial, but also it's access to a new identity. And that's also something that as a prison educator, I have seen in my classes, where oftentimes I heard from my students that the classroom in a prison is a space where you're not treated as a number, you are not treated as someone with a conviction. It's a place where you are treated as a human being, as a scholar, as a student, and that is a really important space of freedom that we are able to create even within the spaces of confinement. The second thing that I want to go back to is the question of adult education, because I agree that as we think about high quality education, about what kind of education we're providing, we also want to think about who are our students and what do our students need, and all the things that our students are already bringing, all the ways in which our students are already knowledgeable and powerful, and all the things that we can learn from our students as opposed to just teaching them, right? Because especially adults, they have a wealth of knowledge that is a really solid foundation for to build upon, and we should not ignore this. We should not treat it as less worthy than maybe the knowledge that we have acquired through books and studies. So, before we move on and continue this conversation about high quality and what are the components of high quality education that we want to bring, I want to go back to Valentine. If you have any other thoughts to share about this question of what are the benefits, why is education important in carceral and reentry spaces?
Okay, thank you very much. Most of the things some points I want to make, Dan has already pointed out to it, and which we'll have to ask ourselves a question: what kind of education are we talking about when we're incarcerated? From my experience, I find out that 98%, within 80% of people being incarcerated, one way or the other, don't have education. And in my own case, I was undergraduate when I was arrested and incarcerated. And one of the things that really helps me so much is having education and enrolling myself, taking that opportunity. And when we look at the crucial, for so many reasons, both for the individual incarcerated and the society, you can see that education is very, very important, because the opportunity I have today, I came from a region where many people who pass through imprisonment, when they comes out, they don't want to talk about their experience, what they have been through, and all that. So today, one of the things that education gives to me is giving me the balance, the power to giving me the voice to stand anywhere without cowering before anybody, and stand before the whole world and say, this is what I am, this is who I am today. So education really play a very powerful and important role in my life, that every opportunity I'm able to grab today, it gives me that opportunity. And also, the importance also is, when we look at the reintegration successfully into the society after release, and to secure an employment. There are some education you have that you cannot get employment. You are being there, you have been discriminated, you are disadvantaged already. So we are looking at the importance of education in prison is, when we come out, despite being stigmatized and all that, education that can give one's the ability to say, okay, with these skills, I can operate on my own. I can, my skills is sellable in the market. People can, so that is the kind of education we're talking about. And it is very, very important that is the only way. For my 21 years experience, I can tell you that that is the only way that people.
Oh, I think unfortunately we
People
lost
can
Alan.
get their
Oh,
voice. People have been able to. A lot of people are coming out together now to find their voice, just because they were educated, and they are no more being boxed or hiding, not wants to talk about their stories anymore. So education plays a very important role in the life of those incarcerated. Thank you.
thank you, thank you. And I think you brought up a question that actually usually it's almost the first answer that that comes when we ask about the importance of education, that is connection to employment, the support that education gives when people are re-entering. I will say I am really glad that this was not the first thing that came up in our conversation, because I think that all the other aspects that we mentioned, education as a tool for self-empowerment, education as a way to step into a new identity, are absolutely crucial things that I'm a firm believer in. But I do think that this question of quote unquote the practical value of education is also an important question, right? And we know that education has the power to disrupt or support the disruption of the cycle of incarceration and poverty and incarceration, because in part it helps people secure jobs that are career jobs, that are fulfilling jobs, that help people stay out of the carceral system. So thank you for bringing that element back into the conversation. And you also mentioned that education has benefits not only for the incarcerated person themselves, but for all of society. And I think that's also something that's really important for us to acknowledge, that incarcerated people impacted by the criminal legal system, like everybody else, they are part of societal networks, families, and communities, and so the incarceration impacts not only the individual, but also their families, their communities, and all of us. And so in the same way, education impacts not just the person that receives it, but but their families, their communities, and us, in many ways, including the fact that we need to hear your voices. We need to hear the voices, the experiences of people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system as a society, and education helps give the tools for people to share their stories, as you mentioned. So going back to this question of what education we're bringing in, what education is important to bring inside carceral spaces, to share with people who are formerly incarcerated. I want us to think about, how do we define high quality education? What is the education that we want to bring in, whether it's what subjects do we want to teach, or how should our teachers be? I know one of the other Global Freedom Fellows from a previous year shared this great quote: "I want to be the teacher that I never had when I grew up," which really stuck with me, because I think that is so true, that we all need excellent teachers, and we are all trying to be, as educators, the kind of teachers that we wish we had, and maybe we had when we were growing up. So I want to ask everybody, what kind of education do we want to bring in? What kind of teachers do we want to be or to support for people who are currently and formerly incarcerated? Dan, I'm going to start with you because I see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to answer this question. So first and foremost, I would say that what we need within, in and around the prison estate, is passion. So teachers who are passionate make the best teachers. Those who are passionate about what they do, what they're teaching, what education means, are the most passionate. They're the most impactful. Now, there is a range of those, because depending on the pay available, the best and most passionate will also go where they get the best pay and get the best recognition. So our prison estates need to have pay that's on par with those that are at the top of that. Because when we look at, and even taking it from the justice side of any state or any country, education in prison has another added element even for them, which is, if this education can stop this person going out and living the same life they did, stop them from reoffending, then it has to have that impact, as well as being able to educate in whatever subject or area that may be. So that then means that they want the best of the best. You would need the best of the best to enable that to happen. And also so we talk about the banner box in this country, which sits across both the employment industry and also the education sector. So banning the box is whereby criminal convictions, past criminal convictions, should not impact, or in fact that an individual's ability to apply for and go and work in a prison or in and around a prison estate in that teaching capacity. So those, I think, are two major elements, because being able to attract and recruit the best of the best is what each population needs to be able to do. So then that is an open door basis in that respect, so that we can attract and bring in the best, and then we sift through those and then attribute the right individuals to the right areas. I think that those two elements there will open the doors, enable us to, for whatever our individual populations, whatever our needs analysis of our individual jails or our justice impacted individuals is, that is where that needs to sit first and foremost.
That's so important. Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for being so concrete. Sometimes we think about those pie in the sky, big pictures ideas, but it really all starts with competent, skilled, and motivated individuals, and we need to have systems to recruit and retain them and ensure that they are able to work in the system, and to do this very important work for themselves and others. So thank you for that. And Valentine.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan. Yesterday I was at the juvenile correctional center, and I spoke with one of the juvenile students. He was crying, and I walked up to him and take him to the corner of the classroom, and we have a conversation. I understand his fears. This is a child who is turning to 18, who turned to 18 years this year, and he doesn't know when he's going to leave the place. And as a teacher, the kind of teacher I want to be, after my conversation with him, actually, I've been in his shoes. I understand him very well. And the kind of teacher I want to be is a teacher who will be a driving force behind their transformation. And that when they leave the confinement of the correctional center, they will look back and said, my life truly would not have been this better if not because of the input, the seed that this person planted. So during my conversation with him, he's able to open up to me what his fear is, his struggles, and I'm able to say, okay, this is what we are going to do. I'm able to provide solution for him because I've been in his shoes. I've struggled. When I remember when I was in prison in 2007, and if you look at there was a kind of a dilapidated zinc house we used for learning then. So then I was teaching the adult students also and all that, and I see as a teacher, I'm able to look at it from a different lens, different from people outside, in normal teachers outside. So the kind of teacher I want to be, a teacher that will help transform their struggle, their nightmares, and these juveniles can become, because we look at them as the future of tomorrow, but I would like it or not, they are going to leave the correctional center. And the most important thing we have to understand is if we didn't gain them now, if we cannot transform them to a right path, it's just like fighting a war, winning the war and losing the battles, and it's going to affect the society so much adversely. So I just want to be that teacher that will be a driving force behind their transformation. That is the kind of teacher I want to be.
Thank you. Thank you. Danny, I know it's hard to follow to come after Valentine, but
so yes, definitely. I think some of the things that I'm trying to think through is at least when I think about what does higher education, quality education in prison look like, right? It's definitely one where students are being given the tools to think critically, right? And they're also being given the opportunity to engage in dialogue, as opposed to just being recipients of information. Like they're allowed to engage in dialogue. And most importantly, I think that teachers, along with talking about what Dan said about teachers being passionate about wanting to be there, seeing themselves also as students, right? And seeing this as a reciprocal relationship, not just in prison, but even outside, right? All professors should approach this role as a reciprocal relationship where we're all learning together, right? Yes, you have a PhD and you might be an expert in this, but there might be things that you don't know, right? And being able and open-minded to learn from other people, I think that's what makes a great quality teacher, right? Along the way, right? Like, just we want to transform students, right? But for me, like, I don't want to be the reason for their transformation. What I want to do is give them the tools to be able to engage in their own transformation and me be a resource in that transformation, right? I want to see myself as the bridge, and as a resource for those that are trying to change their life through education, right? Because that's what I do, right? If I had other resources, then it would be other resources, right? But my resource that I can provide for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people is through education, right? And I want to be that bridge for those folks that want to continue walking that bridge.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is so crucial. We are not there to change anybody's lives. I think that's a very risky mindset, right? As educators, so for any kind of student, going there and thinking that we have the power, or really that we should transform anybody's lives. No teacher can or should transform their students. What great teachers can and should do is provide people with the tools to make their own choices, to shape their own lives. I think it's well worth remembering that. And as you said, we have a lot to learn from our students. Any educator in any context has a lot to learn from their students. And again, going back to the question of adult education of people who have lived experience and really have had a rich lived experience, we need to be able to listen and hear that experience. So thank you for that. We are I want to make sure that we leave time at the end for some questions. So I'm going to ask probably the last of my questions before opening it up to the audience. And we talked about the power of education. We talked about the importance of education. I want to ask about the challenges that we see in bringing high quality education in prisons and reentry spaces in the US, in the UK, in Nigeria, in all the contexts and settings in which you have experience. So what are the barriers that we are facing, and what are you all doing to overcome those barriers?
Sorry, I had a bit
maybe
of a blip. I had a bit of a blip there. Could you ask the question again, please? I missed a part of it.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I'm asking, what are some of the challenges that you are facing that you faced in your personal journey as a student, as an educator? What needs to change, in other words, to ensure that everybody has access to high quality education?
Right. So first and foremost, that I encountered and managed to overcome a number of obstacles and barriers to enable my education, or to be able to complete my education. At the time when I was studying, when I started my higher education journey, there wasn't past the undergrad. There was no provision. It just didn't exist for people in prison. It was one of those things that we kind of got started. I got started by, putting myself out there and writing to almost every university I could think of to ask them to provide a provision for me to be able to study. So I kind of started a bit of a way in that respect. And then, after over, I mean, I'm someone who is severely dogged and determined. When I set myself to do something, then I'm going to achieve it. I just see these things as um, the next thing I need to overcome. They're not blockers for me. They never have been. But then I realized that not everybody's going to be equipped with that same resilience, that same doggedness, especially at that point where they may be just starting or looking to get started within their educational journey. So my understanding, my responsibility was to be able to replicate what I had been able to do and remove those barriers and those obstacles where possible. So hence the inception of our organization and what we actually do to enable students to experience university study in exactly the same way as their general population counterparts, being able to have competition universities competing for student places, and therefore they do that by keeping their standards high, by keeping their delivery high, by having the best teachers, etc., etc., and giving students the choice to be able to go to whichever university best suited them, whichever subject area best suited them. They seem quite vital to me at the time and to us at the time. So then there are certain, but yet still there are certain barriers and obstacles that within our estate, our justice population, that we are struggling to overcome. And the first one of those, and I know that this is going to be a global one, is funding, or access to funding, or access to the ability to pay for the education that sits outside of what is offered within a prison estate. In some countries, in some justice populations, we know that is 0 to none. In others, it reaches a certain level. In here in the UK, we have student loans, the student loans company, but it is curtailed by what we call the 6-year rule, one whereby if you have longer than 6 years left to serve, you cannot qualify for a student loan. Therefore, unless you're able to self-fund, you're not going to be able to pay for that education. So it makes zero sense as to why that is why that 6 years is in place. We understand the reason that they put it in place, but it doesn't work in practice. And with the current average sentence length, especially for life sentence prisoners, being at 21.7 years, you're going to be doing almost 15 years before you can qualify for almost 14 years before you can qualify for a degree level study, or the funding to pay for it. So what we do see, we have the statistical data, the evidence to back up the benefits of enabling people to study at the earliest point in their sentence. I will just hit you with one stat. So the current reoffending rates in the UK up to 2 years after release is 58%. So 58% of people who are released from prison go back. If you offset that stat against those who engage in any form of education, it drops to 31.2% of people reoffend. Now here's the kicker. For those who have completed a undergraduate degree whilst in prison, their reoffending rate sits at 6%. So that's a 50-point swing. So therefore, if we offset the reoffending rates, this came out in a recent spending review here in the UK, that we are spending over 19 billion pounds a year on reoffending. People that come out of prison within that 2 years and go back. If you offset that 19 billion against what it would cost to give everybody who wants to the chance to study education, we're talking about a fraction that wouldn't even hit 1 billion. So therefore, if you look at it just on a commercial, just on the financial common sense, it makes sense to enable people to study. If we drop that reoffending rate, we absolutely decimate that reoffending rate by enabling people to study. Therefore, and we look at it as a country as a whole to make it appealing, attractive to those in power, those policymakers. We just have to show them the data. It should be common sense, whereby they said, hey, it makes sense that we promote education and higher education to its absolute fullest, because we know that it's going to cut the reoffending rates of our country. And I think that there are so many others that will follow that. Investing in people who we talk about the second chances for people in prison, but if we invest, we're talking about people who the vast majority of them never had a first chance. And all those of us who have taken that opportunity, look what we've done with it. That there in itself means that everybody should be open to that.
Thank you. Yes, and I love all those statistics that are very similar statistics for the US. I think reincarceration rates in general are over 70% over 3 years. And as you said, this is a very expensive system that does not work 2 out of 3 times. That should give us pause. Even just that economic calculus A study, a very famous study that was done in the US in 2013 showed that for every $1 invested in education, there were 5 public dollars saved in incarceration costs. So even from that economic perspective, which can be a very powerful argument with policymakers, promoting access to education is really crucial. And as you said, we are seeing so many challenges and barriers. There's the barrier of just not having access to educators, but then there is also the barrier of having access to a very limited range of educational options, which I think it's something that we should think carefully about. Being able to choose a major that suits you, a certificate that suits you, being able to choose if you want to go to vocational education or higher education, or what do you want to do, that is absolutely crucial and not present enough in our carceral system. Danny, other thoughts on the barriers and challenges and systemic barriers that education in prison is faced with?
Yes. So I'm thinking of a few things, right? But I'm gonna try to keep it brief. So one on the personal level, one of the things that I encountered, right, was in my experience was I started my educational journey inside prison, started with what we call a adult basic education, a GED. It's like a high school diploma equivalent. Once I was able to get that, I was able to start a college course through correspondence because I was in solitary confinement. And the problem with that was that it was a very individual approach to education where I had to be responsible for everything. I had to fill out my application. I'm not really understanding how to do that because I'm in solitary confinement. I have to mail the stuff in. So basically I'm just doing my assignments through mail, through correspondence. I do my assignment, mail it in, I get it back, but there's no relationship with the institution, right? It's just mail your assignments and get your assignments back. And that's it. And there's no connection like, hey, when are you going home? What's your academic plan? What do you want to do when you get home? Right? I had to figure that all by myself. Well, not necessarily by myself. I had to go ask questions on my own, but then, people around me took an interest in supporting me. And so we're missing a bridge, right? Like I was in Pelican Bay State Prison, which is about 18 hours close, maybe about from where my mom lives in LA, right? So we're 18 miles apart. When I get released, there's no connection to another institution in that region that says, hey, Danny Murillo is getting out from our college program and he's going to move down there and wants to continue his education. So I had to go to the community college on my own and figure out what was that process, right? Where there's no real, what we're trying to do that is, and that still exists. There's no real communication between institutions in prison with the institution on the outside, because most of the time when students get out, they're not getting out to that same area. They're getting out to a whole new area where they're, it's a very different approach, right? And so that's like kind of like the personal issue, but that's also still relevant, right? The other one that we see now as associate director for Berkeley Underground Scholars is that career pathway. So we have students in here that are pursuing, whatever, it's a bachelor's degree, master's degree in specific fields, but yet we still have specific barriers around certain convictions for specific fields, right? So if somebody wants to study, I'm just kind of thinking out of my head, right? Like clinical psychology, right? Clinical psychology, you need to be licensed, but yet there's still barriers for people with convictions for licensing, right? For instance, we have people that have become lawyers and they are able to pass the bar, but that's still something that they have to advocate for. It's not guaranteed that they're going to pass the bar because of their conviction, right? So we're still facing those career barriers for a lot of folks. And when those barriers exist, a lot of times people just say, you know what, I'm not going to go that way. Instead, I'm just going to go to a career that is friendly hiring to people with my background. But yet that's not what they want to do, right? And what we want to do is give, as Dan said, give people the autonomy to be able to do what they want to do. But if they're facing barriers, that autonomy is blocked off, right? So we have to figure out ways how do we get them in those positions, right? And then lastly, what I'm also doing now on a global level as part of the Global Freedom Scholars Network, right, which I'm about to drop the link to the website. I'm trying to do work in Mexico, and and trying to see what role do I, as a formerly incarcerated person, also a child of Mexican parents, what role do I play in being able to support work that's being done in Mexico, right? So for instance, the US, we deport a lot of people, and possibly those numbers might possibly grow now that we have an incoming president. And so there's education in prison. I know people that are being educated in prison that are going to be deported, right? And so what happens when they're deported, right? What role do these institutions that were benefiting from educating them on the inside, how do we support them once they're deported, right? Can we create some type of system where we support them while they're over there and they're still enrolled online, or somehow support them to get into an institution in Mexico? And there's still a lot of barriers in Mexico that exist regarding stigma and background. Being deported from the US is looked down upon because, you were in the land of milk and honey, but none of that stuff is actually here. I mean, and you get deported, and the people think that you messed up a great opportunity, right? But don't understand that there's a lot of barriers here for people that are migrating here as well.
Thank you. That piece of continuity and coordination is so crucial. I was recently at a convening and a conference of higher education in prison in the US, and someone said very powerfully that degrees by themselves are not what we need. And I think that's really true, because especially for anybody, honestly, but especially for people who are facing as many barriers as people who are impacted by the criminal legal system face, just having that degree, it's wonderful, it's important, but it is not enough. There needs to be awareness of what are the next steps and a connection to those next steps, sometimes to finish that degree or to move on to the next element. And there needs to be awareness of just the careers, what are the obstacles, what can we do to remove those barriers to going into certain careers. So all those things are crucial, and love that you brought up the question of international coordination as well. Do want to remind everybody that we are offering this webinar in partnership with the Incarceration Nations Network and the Global Freedom Fellowship. Encourage everybody to check those out. We'll drop the links in the chat in a moment. But just to say, we need to coordinate within locally and also nationally and internationally, because people in the carceral system get moved around involuntarily a lot, and sometimes get released in states that are not those where they were incarcerated, and sometimes they get released in countries that are not those where they were incarcerated, because they are deported. So really crucial points. Valentine, I'll pass it on to you for your final thoughts on challenges and systemic barriers and that we are facing as we bring education in carceral and reentry spaces.
Okay. First of all, we have, I think, one of the things we have in common, whether in Africa, in the US, in Europe, I think we have something in common from what Dan is just point out just now. One of the challenges that I encountered during my stay in the prison is, first of all, the space where, a space for creativity and for educational activities, with the opportunities were not there like this. And secondly, we have to look at a negative perception that is still on the high, and a negative perception of prisoners. The degree alone cannot solve the problem we are facing right now. When I was in prison, one of the things that discouraged a lot of people, which almost I've known a lot of people who have degree and they have come out for years and they find it difficult to get a good paying job. And at the end of the day, they have resolved to come up with something, a menial job for themselves, working that does not befit the kind of education they obtain behind the bar. So that negative perception is still on the high, where there is often a societal stigma attached to prisoner that, okay, if we have a lot, someone who is educated outside is talking, and you that you are educated behind their ears. So those challenges is what I face during my time. But I just said, well, I need education that will give me the three I, to live a life of impact, influence, and income. So those are the kind of education I was able to say, okay, I need this space to get this kind of thing. Then when organization like Salsa I work with comes up with a different kind of innovation that will give people more variety of choices. Like I'm an accounting student. I studied accounting and finance when I was outside. So, but when I get there, the opportunities was limited. I couldn't get that course. And I can see other people too who cannot get that, maybe courses in IT, courses that, and IT skills and all that were not available to them. So they were bent to go through the other route. And also one of the major challenges, after getting the education that is available for us, you find out you keep spending years after years rendering it useless, and you keep struggling with it. So, and others, they get discouraged that, okay, if this person can have this and it cannot make use of it, so what is the excess for me to pursue this kind of thing? But for the past few years, with the kind of work we put out there and all that, we can find out that a lot of people are embracing the innovative ways we are using, like the life skills, in IT, the skills that I can be in my home and get job anywhere in the world. I said, okay, I'm equipped right here now. I can get job from the US, I can get job from the UK, from anywhere in the world, which is an IT-based job that I can do and get paid for it, maybe graphic designing, any of that job skills that I can. So in my time, those options were not there. So the little ones that were there, we tried to struggle with it and all that. So those are the limited resources, as we all say earlier on, but the limited resources for funding and other aspects of it is still affecting the education system. I'm facing it, I've faced it, and some people are still also facing it. And most time when after the release, the post-release, people find it difficult to continue the kind of education they want, because after release, the survival instinct setting, and they will have to say, okay, I can't continue this, I can't do this. So a lot of people face the challenges, but thank God for the degree, the the degree by the Open University, who has extended the scholarship up post-incarcerated, that after you leave, you can continue and get your degree then from there. So I think we need more of skills that goes beyond just degree, skills that can really equip people, that will not make you be a dependent be on pity with someone, than be on pity with the system and all that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So many great and important points. Like we said, we need people to have access to the education that they want and need, and not just what we think that we should bring into carceral spaces, and we need those really those skills beyond just the degree. Such great and important points. I want, in the interest of time, to move us over to some questions from the audience. Thank you to all of those who have put questions in the chat. I know many of those we have answered organically as we were speaking. With any other questions, please put them on the chat. not on the chat, I'm sorry, in the Q&A, tab, so we can see them. I want to start from a question from Kaya, who asked, how important would you say trauma education and trauma-informed education has been in advancing your personal, educational, and professional journeys? So if anybody can speak about either experiencing or providing trauma-informed education, or thinking that that is needed and important and it's not out there enough. Danny.
Yeah, my experience with you know, I guess what I call like my own personal healing comes through outside of higher education and really through community. Right here at Berkeley with underground scholars, one thing that we do the last 4 weeks of the semester, we partner with an organization called Community Freedom Clinic. They are an organization in East Oakland, and they come into our space and provide non-traditional Western healing practices, right? So we'll bring in folks to do physical massage therapy, cupping, acupuncture, Reiki, sound bath. We bring in these different practices, and we do it the last 4 weeks of the semester, because sometimes, you know, those last 4 weeks of the semester can be very stressful for our students. So we want to make sure that they are taking care of themselves. So a lot of these things that we learn from outside the community, outside in our own communities, and bring them into our spaces, right, to support our students.
Thank you. Yes, that's so crucial. Thinking about community and the healing power of community. And I'm seeing a thread here in our conversations around education as something that it should be approached holistically, not just as a set of skills or a set of credentials, but really something that has to do with the entirety of our identity, and therefore also with our communities and the spaces that we inhabit. We have another great question. How would you recommend continuing to spread the word about the need for education to individuals who may not be aware of the potential benefits and or the lack of educational opportunities for incarcerated individuals? Love to hear everybody's thoughts on how do we communicate. Sometimes in those kind of settings, we feel like we are preaching to the choir, and we certainly have a lot to learn from one another. I certainly learned a lot from all of you today. But what about everybody else? The people who are not necessarily aware of the landscape of the carceral state, or the people that need some convincing around the importance of education. How can we talk to them? How can we convince them? And I'm going to tag on a second part to this question, that is, if people want to learn more about your work and your organizations, if you how can they what do you have a website or anything else that you can you can share?
So yeah, I'll come in here. So first and foremost, I mean, I myself and then the rest of our organization, nobody walked us through the door of a prison or headquarters or any of that. We just reached out ourselves because we felt it to be our responsibility to do so. So we just made ourselves present. We stood at the doors metaphorically and waited until somebody gave us entry. And that is because of the responsibility that we've got coming with that. For people who don't know, the rest of us who do know, who do understand all the nuances, the issues, the barriers, and what everyone in prison, that education is one of the greatest secrets kept in prison, to be perfectly honest. What's available, what can be available, and what should be happening. So it's kind of our responsibility to raise that awareness both out here and, most importantly, behind the prison walls. We know, we understand, we've been through it. So whilst we sit in different positions here now as formerly incarcerated, we understand what challenges, what thought processes, what struggles those that we've left behind are currently going through. We understand the same thinking patterns whereby they're like, why is this missing? Why do we not have that? Why is there a gap here? This is our job, our responsibility to fill those gaps, to answer those questions, to raise that awareness, to make it known to people in prison and those who sit around them as those who hold them and care for, that we are imparting that knowledge and that they now know that we're equipping them with those with that information. I think that's absolutely key and crucial. Yeah, let me end this. I'm waffling on, but I think that it is first and foremost our responsibility in terms of us. Sorry, let me just add in. I will put in our website address and our contact details in the chat. So, and I hope that all the rest of my panelists and everyone else will do the same, because those of us who know or have any experience in these areas should be able to help and inform anyone else who needs to and wants to know and or ask.
Thank you, and thanks for putting your contact there. And I think you make such a powerful case for the importance of uplifting and centering the voices and the experiences of those who are personally impacted by the criminal legal system, because those are the people that have the knowledge to share about what is needed in this space and what are the solutions that actually work. Jenny, Valentine, anything else on this topic? And I thank you. I saw you put your websites on the in the chat.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, how do we convince people who don't know as much? How do we talk to people who don't know as much about the need of education in carceral spaces?
Right. I think Dan mentioned this something earlier, and I think it's also one of the big things that helped us is really sharing our stories and the impact that education has had on us, but not just like the current, like the impact that it had on us when we first received it, but the impact that's having on us after and those around us. Some of us already graduated. We have PhDs, masters, law degrees, and we are contributing to society. And I think those stories need to be highlighted, right? Those are the stories that we need to highlight in our communities and in the halls of power, right? That, people are in prison, whether they've been in there a year or 20 years, right? Whether committed a burglary or a murder, right? People are capable of change when the resources and the opportunities are provided. So I think that's one of the things that has allowed us to be very successful, is that continue to allow us to share our stories, whether it's through documentaries. I actually just put a link to one of the documentaries we recently released called Breaking Barriers. It's like 15-20 minutes, small mini documentary on some of our students here at UC Berkeley, and talking about the impact that education has had on them.
Thank you. Valentine, I don't want to prevent you from speaking if you have anything else to add.
Okay, thank you. Not much. As Danny said, our story is so powerful. We just have to keep advocating it, putting it in people's face to see what education can do. With that, it caught it like a white fire and spread. So thank God that the government, though they are taking some policies regards to that also, from the concurrent list to the list whereby the states themselves can have much to do about this. From there, we can have a lot of work to do. But our stories will stand out for us.
Thank you. And I'm also seeing in the Q&A several questions about how to engage people who have power, and how to do political advocacy. I obviously sharing your stories as crucial and important. I would say also some of the question also, sorry, we, like, some of the things that we have said in this conversation already have the answer to that, in that education for people who are impacted by the criminal legal system is important, not only for them, but for society as a whole. There are economical savings, there are financial benefits for everybody if we invest in education rather than incarceration, and there's an impact on communities as a whole of that education has in prisons and in reentry spaces. So I would say that emphasizing those elements, in my experience, can be really effective in convincing administrators and policymakers of the importance and need of education. Danny, you want to add something? I think you'll be the last last word on this.
For sure. Thank you. So yes, in regards to the question about like how do you talk to people in power, right? Through one of our programs that we have, one of our recruitment programs that's called the Underground Scholars Ambassadors Program, where we work with community college students. It's a professional leadership development program, and we have a workshop titled "Power Mapping Your Campus." Right. So we teach students on how to power map their campus when it comes to building a program for formerly incarcerated students, looking for resources or funds to be able to support any kind of initiative that they want to engage in. So it's pretty much all the community colleges operate the same way. So we that workshop kind of applies in general to across campuses. But also you know, as you're power mapping your campus, and maybe you might get connected with your college president or someone, he might know a legislator, right? But at the same time, you can always do it at the local level, right? You're always gonna have a local legislator office in your district, right? So find out what that district is, whether it's a congressman or a senator. You, as a citizen, can request a visit, right? You can request a meeting as a citizen of his district, or as a resident of his district, or their district, or her district, whoever it is, and have a conversation with them about your concerns. And that's how you develop those relationships, right? And we also have a policy advocacy workshop that we teach students on how to develop policy from an idea, which is one, going to talk to, you know, figuring out what the problem is, talking to your senator, your legislator, and then from there, you know, you build a coalition, you build a coalition that's going to help you that are also interested in that same topic, right? That are encountering that same issue, whether it's locally or statewide or national or maybe nationwide. But that's how you kind of start the process of engaging in advocacy, is really at the local, could be at the local level, at the grassroots level.
Thank you. Love that as our final thought, that we all need to get involved. We all need to support this really crucial and fundamental work. And there are many ways to do that, from really big picture issues to starting from the local level, talking to our local leaders, to our local policymakers, and engaging in those conversations with whoever we have access to. Because the more we do that, the more this will gain momentum and will grow and expand. And there is real power and force in being able to just keep talking about this, keep spreading awareness about the importance of education in prison and in reentry spaces. So in conclusion, I want to thank once again all of our wonderful panelists, as well as the audience, for all of your questions, all of the thoughts that were shared in here. I want to remind people again of a few links if you want to learn more about the Petey Greene program, or about Incarceration Nations Network, the Global Freedom Fellowship, which is co-sponsoring this event. I put some of the links in the chat. And finally, I do want to share that as the Petey Greene program, we rely on community support to make those webinars possible, and to provide the high quality education that we bring inside carceral spaces. So if you are so inclined and you want to support us, please please feel free to do that. We would greatly appreciate that. Other ways that you can get involved with the Petey Greene program are by volunteering, becoming a tutor or an instructor with us. We have all the links on our website for that. Or again, just spreading the word and letting other people know of the work that we do, the work that the other panelists are doing that you heard about today, the work of the Incarceration Nations network. And on that note, thank you again, everybody.